minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast with a classic. The Astro Pub is with me. Honestly, you've been on quite a few episodes over the last couple of months, but it's always good to have a chat with. And happy to have you on, dude. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. As always, it's always fun to come on and talk. So, I know the struggle of finding people to talk to. Sometimes we're just like, I need people, and everyone's just like, no, I have things to do. So,
the Astro Pub's the original Star Citizen podcaster that I know of. I know there's a few different ones that have been going on for years, but the Astro Pub was the first that I really paid attention to, first I was on, and definitely one to go listen to. So whether you're on an audio platform or YouTube, definitely check out the Astro Pub. And it real quick for me, you split up and made two channels, right?
Yes.
So how do those work?
So one's the Astro Pub Live. It's just at the Astro Pub Live, or I think it's just at the Astro Pub might be. But the Astro Pub on YouTube. That one's my content from Twitch. It has the captain's table. It has my office hours. It has my monthly report videos that I do. It has gameplay. I do a stream to it. It's just kind of a more general Star Citizen and just connected to my Twitch sort of thing. And then there's the Astro Historian, which is dedicated exclusively to lore videos, mostly Star Citizen. I've been doing a couple of Starfield videos. I've done Cyberpunk in the past. I've done various other videos as well, but Star Citizen is the main focus, and that has the complete history of the Star Citizen lore series.
Love that one.
I mean, I had to pay. I paid for an actual editor to help me out with that one. It helps out a lot, but it's one of those things where like I would die if I had to do that on my own.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge.
Next one is 45 minutes. So they've been on an average between 30 and 40 minutes long, and I'm only on episode 3, and I'm not even getting to the beginning of the UPE, like the beginnings of the UPE. I haven't even gotten to the Tavaran War or even Xi'an First Contact yet.
Sheesh.
I've just gotten through the Banu First Contact, and so I've got another 100 years before that. And then it just the timeline, just because the density of information is just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. I'll probably have to do like 6 different videos on the Mezzer era just alone. So it's going to end up being like 7 to 12 hours of total content for that.
It's pretty surprising, I think, and some of our listeners may actually not know how expansive the lore for Star Citizen is. It's like 900 years long. It covers almost every decade, I would say, right? Every decade in those 900 years. You've got politicians, you've got wars, you've got alien species, uprisings, different architectural styles and expansionism and all this stuff going on. And it's all supposed to just add context to the game. And the Astro Pub finds a way to summarize it into videos.
I try. I attempt. That's the important part.
Yeah, Herculean task.
Yeah. Like, for instance, one of them is already out of date because as of last monthly report for the last monthly update for Galactopedia, they added a brand new company to the verse called Behest Mining, which is, I'm guessing, a prequel to like the UGFs, which we'll talk about later. But that was founded way back before the first discovery of Jump Point and only collapsed at the end of the Mezzer era. So it's like that alone has its own huge history. And if those people who know of the Centralia mine disaster, which was the inspiration behind the Silent Hill game series, that they have Star Citizen has its own version of that in Null because of the Behest mine, of a mine that's constantly on fire.
I see.
And while that lore is interesting, it's fun because you can also piece together the lore fits together with Star Citizen's gameplay so well that that lore got created because somebody in the gameplay team was like, how can we add fire permanently to the game that people can always experience? I'll just have a mine that's always on fire.
I mean, what better way to display a mine than with fire? So the biggest thing to know about the lore too is, as we've been seeing in the monthly reports recently, the team has started to say no to the stories and stuff out of game, and they are focusing on more in-game lore, which is, I think you've said in the past, a big reason why people don't realize there's so much lore. It's not in-game. And this is going to be great to see because I think it's going to add a lot of more interesting things to find and read in the game for players, something that
Oh,
you
yeah.
see a lot in like Bethesda games.
Yeah, it's definitely something that they're. It seems like they're moving towards, which is a good thing. So when people ask me, oh, that means there's going to be less lore on the website. It's like, yeah, but it's going to be more lore in the game.
Yeah.
So y'all will experience what I've been talking about instead of just listening to me. You'll listen to me and go, oh, I get context for that now. I
Yeah.
can see this in game. So
And there was
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, same here. There was a line in the monthly report, just this last one in January. They said, where is it? They said, in short, and this is directly verbatim what they're saying about the narrative stuff.
Quote.
We have scaled back on original fictional content for the website in order to focus on in-game content. The ultimate hopes is that we will be able to resurrect these stories and news updates in the game. And I didn't realize, I thought they were just working on narrative stuff for the game. I didn't realize they were talking about taking those stories and making them like fictional stories in the game. That's really exciting. Because I want to I want to go to an outpost and find one of those and take it back to my ship and read it while I'm in quantum travel,
Yeah. The other implication that means, which is the bigger one, is a lot of those shows are just a lot of those lore updates are just transcripts. So that implies that what they want to do is take those stories, those videos, and bring them into the verse as video or audio stories that you can listen to in the game. So like a news update that's like, I'm guessing, rendered out with, hello, this is Galactic Report and I'm blah, 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 and then talking about the news updates, which sounds insane, but this is the same company that owns the largest mocap studio in Europe, which, this is
I really hope that was worth
game.
it. I hope that was
like I don't think it was intended. I think it's just they had space and they were like, hey, we'll buy the space because it's available, because it's being built. I honestly think it's a happy accident, not like a gloating thing.
It's a good thing to tell backers. There was space.
Well, for anybody who knows what a mocap studio is, it's just a big room that they have sensors on. That's all it is.
With a lot of rigging for cameras and stuff.
Cameras and lights and audio recording stuff. It's all it really is. So it's not as complex. It's like for those of you who are in theater, it's like a black box theater without any stands, any seating. So it's just a lot easier to do things around.
For those of you not in theater like me, it's like our 7th grade gymnasium, just with a lot more insulation.
Yeah. And just like your 7th grade gymnasium, the floor is covered with pads, so you can jump and fall and roll and stuff.
It also smells like socks and gym shoes. It's true. Anyways,
yeah, go ahead.
I
was gonna joke that considering how long those film shoots can go on, yes, it probably smells like socks and gym shoes.
It probably gets nice and sweaty in there, I'm sure. But we have gathered you all here today because there are some good things being said on the monthly reports. Now, we just actually had a show 2 weeks ago with Salty Mike where we talked about stuff being said on the November-December monthly report. That was fantastic, and we got through a lot of great details. If you haven't heard it, go check it out. He's a happy man with some of the stuff they're talking about. But I wanted to also talk about these monthly reports with Astro Pub because he had his own video about the November-December one, which had some interesting points. And the January one just happened to come out just last week, so I figured we combine them both, talk about a lot of the good news that's coming up this year. But before we get to that, we're still kind of waiting for 318 at this point in time. It's February 5th, 2023, Captain's Log, day 87 of waiting for 318. What do you think?
I actually had C-Daddy CIG who actually told me it's been in PTU for 75 days.
Wow, that's got to be the longest.
Almost a record. No, it's
not quite.
1 day short of the record.
314?
As of Monday, 3-0 was at the record.
Oh, okay.
3.0.
That makes sense.
As of Monday, it will break the record because it's 76 days in PTU is the record. And it's likely going to be longer.
It's going to be longer for sure. That's pretty impressive to be longer PTU than 3.0 of all updates.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I guess that can set expectations for 4.0. What do you think it's going to take for us to get to an open PTU?
I don't think it's going to take too long because traditionally Wave 1 can be pretty long because of bugs and fixing.
Yeah.
Wave 2 is traditionally just take a sledgehammer and hit it as hard as you can and see what falls off, then fix it just so you're ready for the flood that is the wave 3, the open PTU. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw open PTU by the end of this week at the earliest, maybe next week. But I'm still thinking like maybe this Friday would be
Okay.
their internal goal at least.
You think live is
because
still possible
Good.
for the month?
Live this month? No.
No.
Almost. I think March. I think we're going to see probably whenever Stella Fortuna is, they'll probably release right before Stella Fortuna. Just because they probably want a good solid month in open PTU with people hitting it really hard and really
That's fair.
generating all the garbage and such. So, but once it's an open PTU, it's might as well be released. It's just more, the progress doesn't matter. I think that really what hurts most is the pending wipe after with 318 is the biggest issue for this one. But
I gotta say, I've been up until this point, I've been super worried. I guess not worried, but I've really been like waiting with bated breath to see some kind of one of these big tech things that they've been talking about for a long time, whether it be quantum or server meshing or persistent entity streaming or iCache or the entity graph, any of these things. Like I wanted to see them work. Now that we see them work, it's like a breath of fresh air. But now I'm like, okay, now can it scale? Holy crap, is it going to work? Like that. I'm just waiting for them to go to open or even live and just, confirm that like, this is it. This can work going forward. We don't have to scrap it and iCache 2.0 it, because that would be heartbreaking.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. It's always I'm confident that they can do it, and the fact that they've gotten this far, I'm still fairly confident. But it's always that in the back of your head, like, what if they need to fix it? What if it goes away? What if it entirely doesn't work? And
it's always there.
CIG is very prone to being like, oh, it doesn't work, throw it in the garbage and start over and again. And to be fair, they've gotten faster every time they've done that. The iteration gets faster and faster. But it's just so, I think we're burned. Once bitten, twice shy kind of thing, where we're just, we don't know what to do.
Yeah, like, I mean, we're all waiting.
We want it to happen.
Yeah. And on that, I guess that subject of kind of what's going on with updates, what is your outlook for the entire year? Like, there's a lot of different theories going around. Some people think we won't get anything but 318 this year. Some people think we'll get 320 before we get 4.0. Some people are like 4.0 Q3. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen?
For the entire year, I think we're almost certainly going to 319. I think 318 is going to release, and I think a lot of people, but it's so buggy. And it's like, well, that's the secret. It's always buggy.
It's always buggy. It's never buggy.
Yeah. Well, the thing is people have also pointed out that during it was Daymar Rally, that like they had a really smooth experience during the time for Daymar Rally, and people asked, well, what's going on with that? And the answer was that CIG gave was it's 317.5. We've worked out a lot of the issues with 317.5 because of that. It's been we've stared at that thing for so long that we've been able to pull out and optimize little code pieces here and there to make it like run better for everybody. So obviously going to be more stable. And I think that's going to be the case with 318. It's going to come out, it's going to be busted, then they'll do a 318.1. And as the 318.1 for like Invictus. And that 318.1 is probably not going to be a huge addition. They may add some ships and stuff like that, but it will feel a lot better than 318 does when it releases, just because they want to get it out the door and then focus on 319, and then they can go through and like start massaging it to figure out, okay, where did this bug come from? Where did this bug come from? To see if they can fix some of those issues. So
yeah. Agreed. I think we'll definitely get a stabilizing patch, which isn't, it's not out of the norm. I've seen people saying like, oh, it's going to delay the next patch, but it's something that we see with beta. It's more stable, which is nice.
Yeah, I still think we're going to get 319 in July, August. And then the 320 is the question.
Yeah.
You may see a 320. I don't know if CIG, I think CIG probably is a tad bit embarrassed by 318. which they should be, honestly. Now I get that there are some issues, and obviously they need to, you live and learn those sorts of things. But they're taking a little bit of their pride took a little bit of wounding from this, because it's. I mean, I'm going to bring it up. This is the longest PTU that CIG's ever done.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of problems still. Obviously, new technologies and there's some issues, but so I think that they'll opt for a longer, like a 3.19.1 patch in July or like August or September, maybe even for IAE, and try to go in as quickly as possible into 4.0.
So you think
so
they're
that they
gonna?
can-
You think they'll do like a 3.19.1 and have that be sort of like 3.17.2 was last year?
Yes, I almost certainly. Well, 3.17.2 was the where in terms of like where it is, where it was, is going to be what 3.19 is this year. It's just going to be a patch
Right,
where
yeah.
they go over and they add some stuff and they fix some things, but it's effectively it's around the same time. Then I think we'll see a 3.19.1 for CitizenCon and a 3.19.2 for IAE, and then we'll see a 4.0 go into PTU towards the end of the year. Because at least CIG is going to try. As soon as they get the ability to, they're going to try to release 4.0.
Yeah, I think they
before
want to
the
get
end
it.
of the year.
They want to at least get it to Evo by the end of the year.
Probably wave 1 or wave.
That would be
open
nice.
PTU.
That'd be
I think
great.
CIG is going to. CIG will claim victory if they can get it an open PTU for 4.0 by the end of the year.
Okay, so here's, before we move on to the monthly reports, because we are about to get deep into the features, and we will actually talk about where you think they'll settle on that line of updates that we just went over. But before we get into that, 4.0 going to PTU.
Mhm.
Do you think that we are actually going to be seeing, and I mean, keep in mind how long wave 1 has been for 3.18, and people have had to sit there and not be able to play, but watch others enjoy this stuff. Do you think that we're going to actually see like a Pyro wave 1 just sitting there? People are literally just going to have to watch this system that they've been waiting years for not be able to jump in. I really want them to just be like, here's server meshing in 4.0, test it in Stanton, and then we'll wait until it goes to open to do Pyro, because I'm going to feel really bad, man. That sucks.
They might do that, but there's so many things in Pyro they have to test that they're probably going to go wave 1.
Yeah.
I think no one believes CIG when they say wave like 4.0 is the end of this year. I honestly don't. I haven't seen a single person who believes that. Like, everyone's just like, that's ambitious, which is, I think, a failure of CIG's own internal expectations, because they've never been right in their internal expectations, and it's getting to the point where literally their own community doesn't believe a press release when they release it. Just like, okay, that's. I mean, they're not lying. They probably honestly and earnestly believe it. It's just they
It's
don't
optimistic.
seem to understand. They're always so optimistic, and I get to the degree that they want to be eternally optimistic because they want to, because this is an internal deadline, and they're doing. As much as I know people cry about CIG not sharing us, they tell us everything. Especially if you talk to Jake about some things, even off the record, Jake will say, if we know it, we tell you. That's about it. There's almost nothing that stops. The only exception for that is squadron stuff, and that still ends up in the monthly reports and such. So, yeah, unfortunately, I think we're going to see 4.0 jump out, and I don't think it'll be as long as people think. I think we'll have a longer open PTU than we do with 3.18, and I think it'll probably go into, like, we may end up with an open PTU at the end of the year, and then it goes until like March for open PTU, because there's just a lot of stuff to test. Because you can think about Pyro. Pyro is 2.5 times the size of Stanton.
At least,
No.
yeah. I think
it's like 13
around
AU
3,
versus 5 AU. Yeah, so it's almost three times the size of Stanton. That's a lot of space to test.
It's so much space. It's so big.
Not to mention, that's just space. That's not mentioning the new faction systems, the new factions they have, the new missions, the new mission givers they'll have, the various new ships that will be introduced for that, the mechanics that will be introduced for that, like jump points and such. All of that stuff is going to be very complex to deal with, and they're going to need some time. This is the first time CIG has dropped an entire system just in once.
Yeah. Yep.
And
It's going to be a lot.
So with that in mind, it's going to take a long time from the test because they just don't, they're treading on, they don't have no idea what they're doing. They don't know how this is going to work because they've never done this before. And then, Nyx, when that comes out, if that comes out next year, probably will come out next year based off of the pace that CIG wants to set. That'll be a little bit faster. And then you'll start seeing it speed up as it happens because they get used to dialing in their systems for reporting bugs and people get used to like how to fly through these jump points and all those sorts of things, but this is still kind of experimental. So yeah, sadly, I do think we're going to see a situation where people like you and me and Evocati members and people who subscribe or pay way too much money for this game will be playing this game before everybody else does. I'm not looking forward to that because every time that happens, people get really salty and they're like, streamer privilege. And it's like most of us had it because we already spent too much money on this game. I don't know many streamers who get it and they're just like, oh, yes, I'm a streamer, so I get it. Yes, I know I get reached out to for that sort of thing, but I already was concierge. So it's like, okay,
yeah, I definitely tripped into it afterward, not long after. So I would have been there anyways, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's, we're only 20 minutes into the podcast. No biggie. We're going to get into the main topic here. No, it's fine. There's a lot to talk about.
It's a Space Tomato Astro Pub podcast. It's going to go long.
Yeah, it's just how it happens. And, our normal listeners and viewers, they kind of like it. Sorry for all of you who don't, but that's how we do. So I was actually going to talk about like KSP2 coming up and like what's going on with Starfield, but we'll talk about that next month.
I can give you the quick update for that, which is pretty simple.
Oh no, it's
KSP2 KSP2 is looking good, but it's KSP1 a little bit advantage, and Starfield has had no update since.
KSP2 is going early access too, so that should be interesting.
So we'll talk about it probably more later in February because it's coming up later. So
yeah, I had a see, now we're getting off topic again. I had a little poll that I put up on Twitter quoting a developer talking about trying to develop the game and keep it running while it's bugging and trying to eliminate certain bugs. And I put that on Twitter and said, what game does this come from? I gave the listings and one of them was KSP. And a few people guessed it. Surprisingly, most people guessed Star Citizen, which I thought would have been like, nobody would think it was Star Citizen because that's the most obvious one, but that's where most of the votes went.
Yeah, I said it was KSP because I knew I read the press release.
Oh yeah.
So,
well, you may be surprised.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's get into the main reason that we're here. Obviously, the monthly report's the big part, but like the highlight of definitely the January monthly report are the missions, and I think everybody can agree, Paul, as you were saying at the beginning of or I guess before we started, last year felt like a year of locations, getting points of interest going. We had new derelicts, we had new ships in space, we had ruins go from concept to in-game in months. Different stuff came in. This year, though, you're saying it feels like the month or the year of missions. Explain why.
I don't know what happened behind the scenes at CIG, but January is always the year for planning. And it seems like what came out of January's planning was a mandate for missions. This may be because Chris Roberts himself have effectively mandated this. He's talked about it in his letter from the chairman, a lot of the stuff that they wanted to focus on before 4.0 comes out. We also heard Todd Pappy just bang the drum, just bang, bang, bang that drum, being like, gameplay loops. And it may also be that there's plenty of cries from both the community and content creators about, hey, you really are lacking gameplay loops. And I think probably all of these have came together to create this. But based off of what the monthly reports have said, CIG is quadrupling down. They are probably going to expand the number of missions available if they manage to get all this done, which is still a big if. We still won't know.
As always.
Yeah. take this with a grain of salt, because everything I say is based off of CIG's planning, and CIG's planning, as I said earlier, is often wrong. So, but this is a good indication of what they're working on. So even if this doesn't come in this year, it'll come in the next 2 years, almost certainly. Just because this is the main focus, and it's not just the main focus for one thing. Lots of different sides of the company have been talking about it, which means it's in active development, including Montreal, who is very good at getting stuff done. But we have,
Yeah.
mining,
Wait.
salvage,
So
sorts of
hold on.
things.
Let's take first. Let's name every profession that
Okay.
by the end of the year will have both sandbox and mission gameplay. If these monthly reports happen this year, let's start that way.
Okay. So the first I would say is salvage gameplay, and then mining, which we already have, which will have missions as well, according to this. Cargo refactor is going to be also include new missions.
Yep. So cargo haulers.
Collar Hollows, and going along with that, piracy, which we
Right.
saw with 318, and then also we'll talk about that later with missions.
Mm-hmm. Pirates will have their own kind of template missions, like I don't know, a mercenary would. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Instead of go kill this person or bring this person in for bountying, it'll be this thing has this stuff. I want it. Come get
Right.
knock them out, take their stuff, and give it back to me, sort of thing.
Okay.
And then what else is there for templates? Investigations.
Right. Which
Bounty hunt.
they started talking about at CitizenCon.
Mm-hmm. Bounty hunting version 2, which is starting to get a lot of topics. Racing.
Mhm.
Is going to be. We already have those mission templates in the game, and they want to expand on it even further.
Yep.
That's all I can think of right now.
How many is that?
New mercenary missions. That's 8.
8.
Yeah.
I remember.
Someone.
I gotta say, 2018 to 2020, the hot complaint was game loops, and it was like all we can do is maybe mine and run cargo that doesn't matter. Did we actually, hold on, did you count, when you counted cargo hauling, are you counting the courier missions with that, or is that
No? That was just cargo.
Okay.
I don't know about courier missions. I really want courier missions to happen this year, but I haven't seen any. Maybe you caught it and I didn't, but I didn't see any courier missions stuff brought up. So
yeah, I don't know.
It's hard to tell.
But that is 8 careers in Star Citizen that will probably be supported by reputation and progression, and you can make money with. That's a pretty solid catalog of career paths for a newcomer to look at and be like, okay, this is gameplay I could do, or do sandbox stuff. How do you think they're doing on that front? Do you think that would be a reasonable amount for a 4.0 sort of this is Star Citizen going forward thing? Is there anything missing there that you'd like to see?
No, I think that's about it. I mean, courier missions would be nice, obviously, info runners. In terms of actual content, I probably want to see more in depth on the combat side of things, because as silly as this sounds, because combat's that thing we have so far, we're really missing depth to combat, repercussions. So right now, going out and doing bounty hunting is it's fast, it's easy, you can make a lot of money, but there's no repercussions to bounty hunting. It's not like you can't go to Grimhex now because they don't like you because you keep shooting their guys. That sort of thing needs to happen for Pyro, in my opinion, because that makes Pyro more engaging and dynamic.
Yeah.
It's a constant gang war for people trying to vie for the system. It should feel like your actions have consequences, and those consequences will have massive repercussions to your gameplay, which we don't quite have yet. I think that has something to do with the mission stuff and loops, but that's more of a reputation situation. So
yeah.
So yes and no.
That's honestly, reputation is the persistent disappointment I'm getting from these monthly reports. I need to see them talking about doing something with reputation, because like there's so many parts of the game that could benefit from the missions to the progression to people understanding when they're getting pirated to like people understanding what is piracy. It's like it's so key. And like you're saying, if that doesn't see an update before Pyro, we're gonna be in trouble.
Mhm.
That's gonna be hard to figure out without those guardrails. And
They definitely need to be added, or at least the beginnings of some of those systems, just so you can. Because the other thing is, as we said, testing. They need to test these things to see if they work and how players will break them. Because we'll break them. We will find a way of breaking them.
oh boy, that's what we're good at. You hired us,
Yeah.
we're gonna do it. So let's go back to the missions for all these different careers and briefly talk about like what each one is actually going to be. So let's start with the cargo ones. Cargo refactor is coming along. So like physicalized cargo is a thing. We know that you're going to have to load and unload your own cargo. But what have you read and kind of understood is going to be involved in cargo missions? You mentioned there would also be kind of lawless ones. Run us through it.
Yes. So based off of what I read with the January monthly report under the features, this is the gameplay features team. I'll quote it directly. In the US, gameplay features continued with several designed for loading and unloading physicalized cargo, and designs for missions that leverage the new cargo system kicks off. These missions will also utilize the boarding actions now available with soft death alongside the retrieval of containers or other objects of interest. Now, to me, that screams piracy. There may be lawful stuff as well. This is a pirate ship. It's got a bunch of these things. Take it out, grab the stuff we need, and take it. Bring it back. But it's not too difficult to do that, but also be illegal.
You don't generally get many lawful missions where they're like, "Hey, go forcefully board this ship and steal stuff."
Yeah. There was an old bounty hunting mission where you had to kill somebody and then retrieve a box that would explode, that would show up inside the wreck, and then bring it back to a location from like a. But I don't know if that was lawful or illegal. I think it was a lawful mission, but I could be wrong. So you have that mission, which is almost certainly for piracy. So,
and that's I mean, that's a big deal because we were kind of talking about this before the podcast. The way I feel like it's starting to settle in, and this might be how MMOs work. I've never really played one thoroughly. This might be how sandbox games work, but it feels like missions are going to be a great way to introduce you to gameplay, to maybe teach you what the meta or at least the suggested strategy is for doing things, and kind of help you understand who the big players and big parts of that gameplay is, and then just say, hey, you know what, there's a sandbox out there, now you could do it on your own. And pirates getting a mission that kind of teaches how piracy works and starts to build a meta for piracy is going to be really cool, because then we can start to build a meta against it and understand, what's a standard kind of pirate situation. That's exciting.
Yeah, that's big, because these sorts of missions also allow for people to get to make a living or try the options. So like, you want to do commodity trading, having the ability to run cargo for somebody else will tell you exactly how it's going to be like for commodity trading, only it's going to be your stuff, not somebody else's stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a much less risky proposition. And piracy for somebody else, again, same thing. It could be an NPC you're pirating in the future, or a player, doesn't matter, but that whole process of learning if you like it or not is there. So
that's gonna be cool. All right, salvage missions. What is that going to be about?
All right, so I'm going to explain this a little bit, but I would highly suggest, if this is at all interesting to you, that you also watch the latest Star Citizen Live, the one that happened on February the 3rd.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm checking that out.
The mission team has a lot of this stuff was there that they talked about specifically, details like mission givers and such like that.
Oh God, but, I am so happy to hear about mission givers again. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, there's multiple mentions of it too, which is nice.
Oh my gosh.
It's like they finally fixed them. They're finally back. But Salvage is going to be broken down into 3 different things they're going to do. It's called lawful, lawless, and unmonitored. And
Okay.
the lawful missions are effectively a company, it's like a salvage company gets paid to haul in, maybe clear a space lanes or something like that. And they bring in a ship and they say, hey, we're going to pay you, or you pay us some money and you get access to this ship. And so you have to pay them money up front to be able to salvage the ship, but then you get anything you get from that salvage to sell for yourself. So obviously you'll make a profit off it. I don't think CIG is going to try not to, but some of it may be slim margins. They'll have their own sorts of things, which indicates there'll be progression. So the first stuff you're stripping might be auroras or freelancers or cutlasses, and then when you get to the highest reputation, you'll be stripping 890 jumps and that kind of stuff. And this is all protected. It'll be like near a Lagrange point and all that sort of thing. So you'll have the guns of those things and it'll be your property. So they're also doing a big thing about criminality and such. So if someone at least they seem to imply that if someone tries to salvage your stuff that's owned by you, then they'll mark that person as hostile. So then the guns will open up on them, sort of thing. So
It's gonna be it's really cool. Again, it just comes back to the whole idea that like having missions that cover all these gameplay aspects is almost as good as having a new player guide, because it really starts to set the vibe of how the game works on a large scale. And you know that if you run into somebody who says they're a salvager, like they have actually a pretty good idea of what they're doing. At least we hope.
Yeah.
But it's oh man, it's fun to hear about missions for that kind of stuff. And you mentioned the SRV and towing. We know that vehicle tractor beams are coming, and this isn't something that's been confirmed by missions. But do you think that we would see any missions that require you to tow stuff with the SRV anytime soon?
Yes, 100%. Not only have they implied that the January month reports specifically points out that they're completely rethinking how the insurance system works. Maybe not a complete overhaul, but they're definitely changing how the insurance system is going to function because of SRVs. They want to make it so that it's valuable for an SRV to tow a damaged or broken ship into a port and get it fixed rather than claim it. So there's that.
It's crazy how slow these features imply the game is going to be. Like, oh, you got your ship blown up? No. Don't go back to the ASOP terminal. You need to call someone, get them to tow it back to the station, get it repaired, and then you can fly back out there. Which, I mean, I guess is kind of replaced by that timer. But, wow.
Yeah, it's going to be slowing down. Now, it's also important to remember that this is going to be the first implementation of it.
Yeah.
But almost certainly, once they get the AI systems in, you'll be able to call a service, an AI service, and they'll be there fairly quickly. So it's not going to be nearly as long. Same thing with like repair and such. There'll be systems in place that the AI will be able to filter in for players if players aren't there.
Yeah, that's why we have the whole 9-to-1 simulation, so that if players aren't there, AI is there. And
so it should speed up a little bit, but it's still going to be slower than it is today.
Yeah, and just like with the loading of cargo, which will have timers, I'm sure you see this in other games. You pay a higher price, you get more efficient service. Same will probably be true of things like towing too. Let's talk about Bounty Hunting V2. It's going to have missions. Obviously, I think they talked about that in the monthly report, but it's also big because it has the virtual AI system, the security networks that they've talked about. Obviously, it's going to be using this sort of system that requires there to be unique AI that are doing multiple things. What is your take on Bounty Hunter V2? Where do you think it's going to sit in terms of hype this year? Do you think it's kind of a sleeper that people aren't paying much attention to and it's going to be a big deal?
I do, almost certainly is a sleeper, because for a lot of people, the number one complaints of criminals and bounty hunters alike is the God marker. Nobody likes God markers.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know what a God marker is when you pick up a bounty, you will know exactly where that person is, player or NPC, because it'll show up on your map. Now, there are ways you can get around it, like turning off comma rays. It'll remove the God marker and all sorts of things like that. But it's super easy to track somebody with a God marker.
Yeah, you basically just look around wherever you are.
Yeah. Yeah, you can find someone. It's just a timing issue of how fast you can go, and the only way you can defeat a god marker as a someone who has a bounty on them is just run. So it's both not fun for bounty hunters because they're right there, but it's also not fun for bounty hunters because it's all a player has to do is just jump out in the middle of nowhere and log out and be like "F you."
Yep.
So the bounty hunting B2 is going to be slower, likely going to require you to stun somebody and bring them back. But at the same time, it will allow it to be a little bit more engaging and fun because of the whole security net process. They've also mentioned in the monthly reports that Narrative talked about this, where they're making it so it's more natural. So like you'll find criminals where there's like NPC criminals where they're supposed to be. So you won't find an NPC criminal walking around ArcCorp. You'll find them at Jumptown or Reclamation Disposal Orinth or the orphanage, any of those like outlaw locations, the dumping locations, the drug manufacturing locations, those places where you could actually capture them, where there is no armistice zone. But you'll have to find them, and they may actually run from you. So I think that's a system that is going to be engaging. It's part investigation, part like private investigator, part combat. And I think it's one of the first hybrid mission types, kind of gameplay loops that we're going to get for Star Citizen. So I'm interested to see where it goes. But
that's kind of what I was wondering last year when they were introducing investigative missions. I was wondering if instead of making investigative missions, investigation was just going to be like kind of a module of gameplay they can include in other missions. But I do.
You watch the monthly or watch the SCL Star Citizen Live. That's exactly what they said.
Okay,
they don't
good.
make missions. They make the mission tech team or the features team. They make modules that you can plug. The mission builders can plug in wherever they want to. So, for instance, they use the Korea mission, for example. The current Korea mission that's in 318 has a module, which is just the same module that's on for Jumptown, which is called the dispenser module, where it just dispenses out stuff. They also have they built some new modules like the counter module, I think it's called, or something like that, which will spawn the mission for a counter mission. That's its own module.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all flexible enough that a mission designer can like plug and play and put them into their own missions if they want to. And so the goal of the tech team is to build the mission features team just to build these modules and then put together examples of these modules for people to do it. So almost certainly that investigation module will have its own modules inbuilt into it that will then borrow the bounty hunting team will then borrow. So.
That's good. I think for myself, the ideal system, and I can't think of every edge case, but I imagine a system where you can essentially start a mission chain and break out of it at any point. Basically, excuse me. Basically, hold on. Excuse me again. Basically, for the third time, you could say start a mission where you have to go get an object from a ruined ship. You find the object, but while you're there, you also get a data pad that talks about a hidden stash. You could sell that data to somebody else, create a mission for them, and they finish it off. Or you could take that data yourself and complete the mission. Or let's say you found the coordinates to some mining claim. Instead of you get a mining mission and go and run it, it's kind of like it's the next part of the mission in that chain, but you could just pass that off to somebody else. I would love to see that kind of modularity in the missions, and maybe that's what they talk about, but I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, I don't think they talked about that directly, but that sounds about right. I'd love to see that as well. Those sorts of features that requires mission persistence, though, which I think they want to do with 318 and 319. Yeah, I think that's another thing to really look forward to, is that sort of mission persistence module stuff. So
that would be cool. That'd be very interesting. One of the other things I wanted to talk about with the bounty hunting stuff is something we keep seeing in the monthly reports. We've seen two different names, the local law office and the bounty hunting office. Do you think those are the same thing, or do you think they have
I think they're
a different reason? Yeah.
Well, there are two mission givers, which we know exist, which have been talked about in lore, which have, since CIG ghosted mission givers several years ago, they have been dormant. They're supposed to be in Orison. There is a Crusader security like desk at Orison where they're supposed to be. You can actually go there. It's in the same place where you can go to the bar, like the top floor is the bar, that bottom floor where they have the Kelto and the clothing stuff. If you go to the second floor of that, you can find them there.
Okay.
That is what I think they're going to be doing. I think there will be two things in terms of there will be a two sets of locations, because there is such thing as the Bounty Hunters Guild in Star Citizen lore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you will have Bounty Hunters Guild locations and then local security offices. Which may be the difference between, say, local bounties and then system-wide bounties, or galactic-wide bounties.
Yeah,
I think that's what they're trying to build out. And those
might be two
different things.
I assume that
I'm guessing it's a mission giver, is what I'm saying. The Bounty Hunting Guild is probably a mission giver.
Right. And I assume that law office is the advocacy.
Yeah, it'd be like the advocacy or the local security.
Right.
Like Crusader Security, Hurston Security, Blackjack Security, Microtech Security, that kind of thing.
Okay. So in addition to what we've talked about here, there is also mining missions, investigative missions, mercenary missions, which we already know quite a bit about, and I think that's mainly it. I think one thing that people are really wondering about, it's kind of the question in the sky that I'd like to pose to you. When are we going to, or rather, how are we going to get exploration missions? If that's even a thing.
I have a whenever I give this take, people get upset with me because the reality, I think, that of exploration is that exploration is about cartography. It's about map making. And I always use the argument that at the beginning of every episode of a Star Trek series, like classic Star Trek, it's always them charting a stellar anomaly or charting an area of space that hasn't been charted before or has been charted before, but they're just updating maps. It's either that or like going to deal with an outbreak of a plague or a flu, or doing kind of aid sort of locations. Mm-hmm. So I think the majority of gameplay for Star Citizen is going to be similar. It's going to be go to this area, scan it for any anomalies, bring back that information. And I know a lot of people, that's not exploration. They don't want that. They want to find jump points, and they want, but I think it's not going to be go to the same location every time. It's going to be going to different locations. And I always feel like people forget how big the universe of Star Citizen is. Like, Stanton is huge. It's massive. 5 AU is a lot of play space, considering most of us only ever use the spaces around planets. This would be like jump to the middle of nowhere, some spot between Hurston and Crusader, and scan this area for this many of kilometers, go to this location, scan, load this location, scan. And you may not find anything, or you may find something interesting, or you may just find a wreck or rubble or an asteroid or something like that. And I think that's really where those missions will come in. I don't know when that's coming in, though. I think that's probably, we have to wait until scanning comes in at the very earliest for those sorts of missions.
And those,
but, this also means for things like going down to planets. Go to this area, scan this area, or maybe even drive through this area with little scanners and put down little markers and stuff like that. So they'll be, for those people who just want to sightsee, those will be perfect missions, because you're like, hey, I found this great mountain because I had to go scan this region, and I just walked up there and watched the sunset because it's really cool. So it'll be those sorts of things.
So that might draw attention to the fact that like our scanners need to be better than at picking up not just like anomalies, mineable or loot or something like that, but like you said, a mountain, a river, just something that's a little different, like a cool landmark. I would really like if scanners could somehow identify that stuff. I know that's going to be pretty difficult to do. I'm not sure if that's even possible, but I'm in agreement with you. I do think that the missions are generally going to be that kind of like basic find these resources. And it
Yeah.
makes sense because that stuff's always going to be replenishing in star systems. People are so worried about, the game is so small, I'm never going to be able to explore stuff. And it's like, for what the job is, which will be tied at the hip with data running and probably pretty tied together with other professions like mining and salvage, you could do plenty of exploration if it's like that forever.
Yeah. Um, it's pretty dynamic in terms of how it can work. The one thing I will say is we do know that they have at one point started on long range scanning, that whole system, but I do believe that was put aside for the current resource system. So that's why I'm like, when the EU PU team starts talking about scanning again, that's when you know that that's when we're going to get content for like those sorts of missions.
Yeah.
So
And at the very least, right now, investigative missions kind of are leaning into that. A little bit of some exploration aspects on a small scale.
There is a cool little thing that I'll add on to this that we learned about the investigation missions. Specifically, they're starting to script them, starting to build out the locations for these. And one of the they used an example of why the writers are very key to them working together is that I think it was Will Weisbaum wrote a script, for the investigation, and he specifically pointed out a part of the scene that the player is going to investigate. 2 cocktail glasses that were to be put near some pieces of like at this certain location, and the designer was like, "That was really cool because I didn't even think about it at the time." And it's like, "Yeah, I'll make sure to dress the scene properly for that." So I think we're getting a lot of noir, sort of private PI, slow jazz music in the background. Everything goes black and white, kind
As long
of
as I'm at
missions.
as long as I'm at the cantina in Daymar,
Yeah,
like set the stage for me. I want to be in Star Wars for that.
She just walked into my life after being out for 4 years and asked me to find her husband. kind of missions.
Oh my gosh, give me Citizen Noir. I freaking loved LA Noire. Such a good game. I always like the really obvious, like if you set it to lower difficulties and you'd be interviewing somebody and they would lie and they'd just be like, yes, of course, officer, I never saw that person. And like they do some crazy face like that.
Yeah.
For anybody who's listening, I just like screw face really hard. This is really funny. But anyways, speaking of cantinas on Daymar, that's going to be my transition of choice for this one. Let's jump from missions. No, we didn't go through all of them, but I think we touched on them pretty well.
Yeah.
And talk
before
about.
we do, there's one thing I do want to point out.
Okay, yes. Take me back.
Just real quickly, salvage and mining are mirrors of each other. They're the same missions. There is one mission that a lot of people are confused about, unmonitored missions. Those are Jump Town, but with salvage and mining. So you pay for a location, it's in unmonitored space, but anyone who pays can get access to it. So it's just Jump Town or Secure Post Karaya, the way that works, kind of thing. But it's very similar.
It's like a public job board. Basically, they're just putting it on the bulletin and saying, "Hey, pull off one of those little paper tabs on the bottom, and you have access."
Yeah, you got to pay the money, but so you're risking it, but everyone else has access to it.
See, and I love that. That is great. Yeah. We're gonna have missions that you can get that are only going to you, that like are closed loops of gameplay you can depend on, and then there's like, oh yeah, a recent data runner brought in a claim that there's all these mining rocks out at this place. We're gonna put it out there for any miners who want an easy way to find some stuff and not go through their own explorer. Go out there if you please, and then just see the emergent gameplay that comes from that. That is so good. Seeing that in every system with every different type of gameplay, with different factions involved, is God, that's exciting.
It's perfect. And they're all mission giver missions too. So they've implied that like the salvage one is there was a big battle and this mission giver knows the site of the battle. So you have to know that mission giver pretty well and they'll sell you the location, but you only have a certain amount of time before like the UEE shows up and starts cleaning up. So you're on a timer. You have like an hour to get through that. but everybody else also has that hour. So it's not just PvP, but it's also PvE. You have a time issue. You have a opposition, and you have the PvP or the PvE kind of beat stick coming in to clear you out if you don't do it in time. So it's a nice little this fun dynamic mission. It really is a dynamic mission, is what it sounds like they're doing. But without the dynamic mission attached to it, like the grand narrative attachments.
Yeah.
So,
This is good stuff. This is gonna make Star Citizen. I mean, we've already kind of been seeing some of the gameplay being worked on, but like the combination of the potential of these missions with the amount of game loops we're talking about, with the locations we're going to talk about here next, is shaping up, besides stability problems come 2024, shaping up to be a really wide-ranging space sim. Like a game that's going to offer an actually pretty decent amount of gameplay if these missions run well. It's the big if.
Big if. So,
well, let's talk about locations. Yeah. So, first thing I really want to start out with is it seems like they're setting up archetypes. I call them cities, space stations, outposts, underground facilities. I kind of feel like caves could also be there, but generally I'm just looking at these spots and seeing these are like their dungeons, kind of. They can do missions here, they can do trade here, they can do like civilian NPCs. How are you feeling about like the way they're introducing locations overall, and what are you seeing?
So there's two things. The lore side of me is saying, phone call.
Saying you got a call.
I got a call. It's work. Saying that I can go back to work on Monday, so it's nice. Yay, because they got power back up. But the lore side of me is excited because these locations will all have stories attached to them. CIG is very good at environmental storytelling. Just for reference, go to Maria Pure of Heart. Just listen to the announcements. Walk around the bottom floor. Go up to a second floor, third floor, and just walk around the hallways and look at all the stuff that's attached to the walls. It's telling a story if you were there to look at it. Bethesda does this pretty well. Valve is very good at these sorts of things. CIG is getting very good at environmental storytelling. And with these locations, we're going to start to see that merging of the environmental storytelling with CIG's gameplay and the storytelling of, actual characters and people in the verse. These locations, things like the outposts, the colonial outposts with their own different like versions of them, the overlay system, all of the different Rex, like the procedurally generated Rex we know about that are going to be happening, or the different stages of the Rex to tell you when this ship crash. Is it recent? Is it old? All those sorts of those locations. The Pyro, like Ruin Station. This is the lore, so it could be changed because things do change in the lore. But generally speaking, the rule is if it's in lore, they're trying to shoot for it. And Ruin Station is not a landing zone. It is a war zone. It is a landing zone that has constant battles because while Xenothreat controls Ruin Station, it's this, as we've seen pictures of it, it's a huge station. It's massive. And there are other gangs on other parts of Ruin Station that are vying for control. So they're trying to like bum rush Xenothreat and kick them out of the central location so they can control that region. So that area alone is going to be so unique as a landing zone because it's not a safe landing zone.
Great opportunity. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, all they have to do is replicate Siege of Orison missions inside of Ruin Station and just say, hey, you can either fight for this faction or that faction. Boom, pirate missions in your pirate landing zone for pirates to go and have easy gameplay where they're not getting constantly hunted by bounty hunters.
Yeah, easily. And we can already see that with the Siege of Orison. For instance, the Siege of Orison platforms, we know are going to get a brand new mission attached to it, which is stopping pirates from stealing some tech or helping pirates steal some tech, be the pirate stealing some tech from the mission platforms. So there'll be two different variations of those missions, which will be very interesting to. You can either stop a heist or do the heist. So add Payday to the list of games that CIG is trying to
Yeah.
mimic
Yeah.
onto its own location. So
Do you think we're going to see underground facilities this year after this
Yes.
latest monthly report? Yeah.
100%. Absolutely. And I can tell you that because, as I mentioned earlier, the Behest mines, that is 100% the backstory for abandoned mines, for abandoned UGFs. All abandoned UGFs will probably be Behest logos and Behest. And the reason why they added it to the lore is because they've been writing it for those locations. So now they have it written, they have it in the Galactopedia, it's all set aside so they know where these locations are instead of them all being from Shubin or any of the other companies.
Mhm.
It's almost like if we don't get them in 319, we're definitely getting them this year.
I hope so. I was concerned at when we saw the November, December monthly reports because they said they were still kind of feeling out experiments for how to do them. But then in January, I was very surprised to see they were like, okay, they're in production. Like we're working on them. And I know a lot of people saw them at CitizenCon and were thinking, oh, we're not going to see these for 2, 3, 4 years. But I agree with you. I do think there's a good chance we'll see them this year with some gameplay attached. Now, a question I have for you is regarding these locations is obviously we're all thinking about the combat implications of it. Do you think that kind of like how space stations have archetypes and outposts are going to have archetypes with refineries and mining places and research outposts, do you think that the UGFs will also have different types of missions and gameplay taking place at them?
Oh yeah, almost certainly. We'll almost certainly see mining operations where you can go down and work for the company to mine out a certain area. Like, hey, we're doing an outside contract. We need you to collect this many goods and bring it back. We'll almost certainly see, because there's another thing that's been mentioned multiple times, which is hard. This is the thing about reading monthly reports is that a lot of people don't realize just how much CIG tells
so
us
much.
that they just don't want to tell people yet because they don't have all the full information. And CIG is very hesitant to give out information unless they know 100% that this is the way it's going to happen, or at least I think they say like a 65 to 80% certainty is when they start telling us about what they're doing. But in the monthly reports, they don't care. They're just going to tell us everything they're doing.
Yeah.
So creatures, you and I know it's been mentioned for months. They've been working on creatures since like July of last year for like various archetypes. We know that they cloned the Vanduul AI archetype and then attached it to creatures.
They're working on animations.
They worked on animations. They've been working on behavior. They've been working on movement and how they traverse. They've actually, I think it was in January, they gave them the ability to traverse on the like outside. It's like the stuff that allows for AI to run around outside and not in facilities. They have those.
Yeah.
So we could easily see a situation where there's an infestation. Your job as an exterminator, go in and kill out all of these creatures that have infested the caves or the mines. Or,
it would be very cool.
Investigation missions. There's so many different archetypes they could go with. So.
Yeah. I do definitely still think creatures are a long ways off, but I hope that we do see missions taking place in the UGFs that are different from others. What about space stations? They've talked a little bit about like space stations. We know from way back that they were talking about like, you remember when, I think it was probably 2018, 2019, when they were talking about how they wanted to do derelict space stations. Yeah. And then we also know that they're working on asteroid facilities. Do you think we might see anything from those two developments this year?
Yeah, maybe. Both of those are for like Pyro and for Squadron 42.
Yeah.
Both of those are being worked on for that. We know that they've been doing heavy amounts of work for pirate stations for Pyro. And they were very hesitant to do the same thing to bring outposts and ruined outposts from Pyro to Stanton. But they eventually just said, why not? And just did. Yeah. So I think that's almost certainly what they'll do. I don't know if it'll happen this year, but I'm hopeful that it will. Having a nice remote outpost that's derelict, that's taken over by pirates, would be a nice little something different than just Grimhex. Would be
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, that would be nice. Speaking of the outposts, we've also seen some variety in that front, from like the kind of town-looking outposts of Pyro to some mining outposts. We've seen a like gray box, and they had like the resource network parts of it kind of blocked out, and then also I think a refining kind of style one. Do you think we'll see that kind of variety brought to Stanton, or you think all that's being planned for Pyro?
All of that's coming into Stanton. I would say before the end of the year. I would say at least the basic town version will probably end up in Stanton this year. It's just they are so far along with it. I think they're just waiting for 318 to stabilize. We may even see it 319.
But
Honestly, that's it. It's so far along.
lore-wise, shouldn't Pyro and Stanton have different architectural styles for their outposts? How do you think they're gonna explain that?
Maybe standardization. I mean, you can also think about like if you look at the International Space Station today, all of the modules are made by dozens of other countries, but they all look the same because they need to have it standardized for launch purposes. So the
Yeah,
idea of having these facilities that are standardized, like a standard early settlement system, makes sense. I mean, the two are very different. Like Pyro was founded well before Stanton was even discovered, but we also know that Stanton had residents living in Stanton before the UEE showed up. So
yeah,
them using an old pattern of like habitation building, like an old blueprint for building these things, especially since these look like they're using natural resources of the planet. So they're cheaper to build than like a modular outpost. That makes sense. It's easy to wave away in lore as these are old outposts that were from the original settlers of Stanton that got evicted from their homes when the corporations came in and took it over. So
I do really hope that we see, because I know they want to get rid of the stilts, get away from the stilts outposts. I do hope that we see a return for Stanton at some point, maybe when they start building out other systems and get more assets to the kind of utilitarian style outpost. Because I agree, I see the perspective of like them having the old colonialism style, but I do like the feel that Stanton is like more commercialized. It's more kind of like metallic and mass produced than the natural stone of
yeah,
the colonialism stuff.
I think they'll go over that and redo that. They'll touch it up with the new systems they have once they do that again because they want to probably make that more modular than it currently is because these systems are old. Those stations, those outposts are ancient. So
Yeah, and I hope they sell that. Really do, with like the lore and objects you find inside and the stories related to it. I really hope they can sell how old it all is.
Mhm.
Um. All right, we're gonna take a nice little step into probably the most controversial topic of this show today. It's not one I did not let you know we were going to talk about this one beforehand. So
Okay,
get
I'm
ready,
getting surprised.
buddy or butts, folks. We are going to talk about the skill system because it came up in CitizenCon. It caught everyone by surprise, and we were kind of, I think, waiting to see when CIG was going to talk about it again. And they brought it up in this most recent monthly report. Didn't really shed any new light on how it works, but I figure let's talk a little bit about it. So did you see the update? You know what they
I
said
did.
about it? So
The monthly report where they said that they were working on some of the initial like stamina system,
yeah.
I believe it was that they were focusing on.
So going off of that with that context, give us like a brief lowdown on kind of what the plan is with this skill system.
Let me bring up the
It's so debated. Oh boy. I
Yeah.
think this is probably going to be one of the more debated things in Star Citizen overall, like long term.
Well, I think it's the argument is so I'll explain what the skill system is. So for people who have no idea what we're talking about, the skill system is supposed to be a passive attribute system. If you've played games like Morrowind, or I don't know if this was the same in Skyrim, I think it is, or even Tarkov, they have similar systems where the more you do something, the higher you get, the better you get at that thing. But the idea is hopefully, and this is again slippery slope. This will not directly impact gameplay as much as it will allow you to specialize in certain things. So somebody who is a fighter pilot may have better stamina or better like black out less because they've practiced it more and more and more. So their character has better tolerance to G's than your other characters. If you're running in heavy armor a lot, your stamina will go up higher so that you have better stamina so you can run a little bit faster or a little bit longer in heavy armor than somebody else who isn't used to wearing heavy armor. So I get the idea behind it, which is to reward people who specialize in a certain aspect with better skills that help them out in those aspects, just maybe a little bit. The problem becomes is that it unbalances the game where people will find the most meta attributes to do. And the fear I have is that you can be good at everything, which is a terrible idea in my mind. I don't think that's what CIG will do. That would be the only thing I caution against it is I feel like they really need to make it so that when you have good attributes in one, if you really have to like focus, like specialize. And if you specialize, you will not have good attributes. Like somebody who's running around in heavy armor has to run around in heavy armor a lot, all the time.
Like every time they
and
go.
As a result, yeah. But if the second they stop doing that and they try to do like, hey, I'm going to be a fighter pilot now, then that skill atrophies down to where it was before while you build up the other stuff. So you have to constantly be doing these actions in order to increase your skills, and otherwise they'll diminish. That rewards people for specializing without compromising the ability of someone just meta gaming the whole thing. So,
and I think a lot of the debate comes from the idea, I mean, for starters, the fact that for the most part in the history of Star Citizen, the emphasis has been on player skill and the person who's controlling the controls being good at what they're doing. This is why mining uses the golf swing mechanic. You know, you got to have the focus to do that. This is why Salvage is using a non-immediate laser that requires you to, time it at your own rate. This is why flying is going to have the heat system in VTOL. This is why you can't just carry a magic bag full of everything. They try to really emphasize the consequences and stuff of those choices. And a lot of people are worried that this is taking a little bit away from the idea of player skill being the defining factor of how good you are at things. I think, though, there are degrees. Some people will say, hey, it's okay if it doesn't have a big effect. Hey, it's okay if it maybe changes the speed of animations, but doesn't make it so that my aim is actually better. And there's like a whole spectrum of how people disagree on this topic, which I think is why it's going to be so heavily debated. But I can't say I'm sold on it, to be honest. Yeah. I'm more neutral, I would say, in terms of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. My only question is why. I'm a big believer that, like, yeah, it's nice to have things, but why have this? Like, what's the purpose of this? Like, does this improve gameplay? Does this make the game better? Does it make the game feel better? If the answer is because we wanted to, that feels like, okay, but that's not an answer.
Right.
Like, games need to have a feel. Like, you can have lots of cool things. The era in gaming universe where every game had a grappling hook. Why? Because it was cool. It didn't necessarily make those games better. It's just you have a grappling hook. It's just like a gimmick. And I feel like that's what this is. This is a gimmick. Chris Roberts likes playing Tarkov, or saw people playing Tarkov and saw the data system, or some of the developers may have saw the system and said, hey, we'll add that to our game. And it's like, but does it add anything?
And like a supporting member is saying in the live chat right now, this is the kind of thing that a lot of people were attracted to Star Citizen because it sounded like it wasn't going to have. The whole player skill conversation was enticing to a lot of people, and honestly, it attracted me as well. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm also of the kind of why aspect, because I did also think that it was kind of about, like we said, consequences, preparing yourself correctly. Hey, you brought that environmental armor. That means you're more impervious to environment problems. Hey, you brought that extra food, so your stamina is higher and you can run longer. Hey,
Mhm.
you have cybernetic legs, so you can wear heavy armor and sprint for longer. I thought those were the kind of differences we would be making to make those changes to our character and how good, bad we are. Seeing it be taken away from the possibility of equipments or thing like that and put into this sort of player skill system is why I end up at the same conclusion as you. Why? Why did it have to
Yeah.
be player skills and not that stuff? And I think a lot of the obvious answers are that, they're bringing more value to your character, making it so you don't want to lose your character and die as much. I would argue, do you need to do that to accomplish that?
You already have that, and the it comes to the point where it's this is a classic CIG thing. Think about the recent changes to ballistics, where they changed the ballistics, and everyone's like, but why? And CIG says, oh, because we want to gather data for other things.
Mhm.
And then they found out, oh wow, ballistics are super OP when we make them OP. So we're going to give everyone temporary armor and completely negate everything we just did. And it's like, why don't you just remove the changes to ballistics then? Instead of making
Yeah.
a patch for a thing you already changed and broke. It's that kind of thing. It's like,
Yeah.
why are you inventing a solution to a problem that you already created for no reason? I feel like that's the same kind of pattern we're seeing with skills, which is it's a solution to a problem that could have been solved in a simpler way that they want to do that they could easily have done in other ways. That's just they're adding complexity where there doesn't need to be complex.
Yeah. And I think this will rechange priorities when it comes to actor feature stuff. They have to focus on the player skill system now instead of possibly maybe cybernetics or insurance timers or stuff like that, stuff they're working on. But you just, I don't know. It's an interesting time to be making the change too, kind of late. But we'll see what else they have to say about it throughout the year.
I will say though, I have no problem with this in Squadron. The Squadron makes sense.
Yeah.
Because that makes more sense of your way you play will affect how good you are at that.
Mhm.
That's a replayability thing. Like I see why it was invented, and obviously it was invented for Squadron first. I just have finding a hard reason to port it over to Star Citizen other than they already have it for Squadron.
Agreed.
So
yeah, I don't know. But we'll see. Let's finish up here with talking about. We didn't actually talk about the ships that they have coming up. Okay, real quick. Ships that we know are being worked on right now. We've got a pretty big selection of ships coming up. A lot of them unannounced. Name them for us, or at least go through some of the ones that you've seen. I know you've got a theory about one of them, if you want to share it or not.
I have a big theory about one of them. Let me look at the ships released. So we know there is a small ship, quote unquote, that actually is getting possibly a variant. We have the SRV, which is announced, which is on final art. So it is almost done, which is why a lot of people, and plus all the mentions of tractor beams, were almost certainly CIG's at least aiming for tractor beams and the SRV to be a 319 release. The Spirit is rapidly going through development. Most of the spirits are in gray box now.
I have a question regarding the Spirit for you, because this is now going to be something I think we come back to with every ship that is released or talked about being worked on. Would you say that the Spirit counts as being in the backlog?
Yes, 100%. They've sold it. Anytime they sell a ship, in my opinion, it's in the backlog.
So if they sell one like 1 week and then 2 weeks later they're like, it's coming out, you could be like, they're working on the backlog.
Yeah, they are. I think there's a different discussion about that though, which is why are they choosing on working on newer ships in the backlog versus older ships in the backlog? And that whole discussion, I think, boils down to size. Because if you look at the older backlog, there is almost no ships smaller than a capital in the older backlog, except for two, and these are the two that boil my blood. The Ranger, which is, I get a little bit, you got to sit down, you got to work on how to make a motorcycle work, and the X1. The X1 is absolutely like irredeemable. The fact that they've sold the X1, they released the 400i, which has a bespoke X1 hangar. all the X1 is a hover bike. It's the same thing as the hover quad, as the all these other ones, and they've done extensive work on them. But I'm not saying I'm not trying to trivialize their work on ships. I know it takes them some time, but it can't take them more than a month to bang out an X1 from the artists, like probably an artist, a designer, and a couple of weeks in testing and working on it. Maybe at most a quarter. But they refuse to release that.
Yeah, they need to get that one out.
So those are the two that I'd be like, CIG, what are you doing? Like, there's an excuse for we don't have the Perseus out because the gameplay for it isn't really there. It's like, yeah, I get it. I get why the Orion it's there's not even enough people in a server to run an Orion or a Javelin. I get those arguments. But when you have small ships like that, it's just like, really?
Yeah.
Oh, but no one bought them. It's like, yeah, but people did buy them. just suck it up, Buttercup, and just punch it out.
Seriously,
everyone will feel better.
No, they need to get that one out. I was actually reading the monthly report here, and I can't remember where it was. Maybe it was, I don't know. There was a line that was on here, and I thought maybe it was the X1 or the Ranger they were talking about. I really do hope it is, because those
traditionally, and here's the thing: every time they say an unannounced ship, it's an unannounced ship. It's not a ship they've already talked about. So
right, but some of them here, like this, says an all new ship rather than an unannounced ship. So then you think, okay, maybe it's not unannounced; it's just something that they've previously announced, and now it's newly being worked on. So you never know with them, but we'll see.
Yeah.
The last. Go ahead.
I was going to say the last couple ones, which are there's a vehicle, like a ground vehicle that's been worked on. And then there's another vehicle, which was passed to the systems design team, which is an interesting choice. That means that it's a ship that is doing a brand new gameplay feature that doesn't exist yet, or does exist, but they need to have them design more about it. So maybe salvage or repair, maybe something that does not have, that has a specific purpose that is not just fly combat. And then there's another ship they've talked about. And then, as you said, finally for ships, an all-new vehicle entered Gray Box, and a new set of alien paints for future release. So that's 5 unannounced ships, or new ships, which are not detailed.
Yeah, they've clearly gotten better at getting ships pumping out. That was it, by the way. The all-new vehicle entering Gray Box. It's not unannounced, and it's a vehicle, not a ship. So that could be an X1.
Could be the X1. Or the Ranger. I'd love to see the Ranger. I am a big fan of the Ranger.
That would be cool. I would also really like to see one of these ships be a repair ship. I think dedicated repair would be like, that would probably kind of complete for me the main game loops that we need to see. Mining, salvage, repair, FPS, and ship combat are like the 5 game loops I feel make up kind of the core, and cargo hauling, I guess, are like the 6 core game loops in my opinion. And then you get exploration and data running and bounty hunting and stuff, but like those 6 being wrapped up like that would be great. And then also in the tech animation section, they also talk about the Hull C. So that would be another backlog ship that they're working on.
Yeah, well, this whole C has been completed and not completed multiple times over the course of years.
Since like 2017, we've been seeing it like in engine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they said it was done like in 2017. It's just they wanted to go back and work on it and touch it up to make it a little bit better. And then
physics grid stuff.
And,
yeah. So. All right. Last thing that we're going to talk about today before we get going. You had a theory about the HUD based on the November-December update. I don't think it was something they talked about in January, but like UI is something we didn't really talk about today. And it's probably one of the bigger mysteries as to like when they're shipping it, but we know that there's some stuff coming up. What is your take on recent developments with the HUD?
They scrapped it. They mentioned it multiple times. They mentioned it during CitizenCon that they threw the HUD away. Because they talked about the new HUD, and Jared was like, "Well, let's be specific. The new HUD is not the new HUD that people have. It's a new HUD. It's not the old new HUD. It's new HUD." And
which he said in CitizenCon too, right?
Yes,
when they were testing quantum boost.
He said it at CitizenCon.
Yeah.
And then this was the first indication where they said that they were working on a brand new HUD, and it was based off of their MFD work. So my theory is that the HUD is going to be modular, at least attempting to be modular, so that anything that can show up in an MFD can show up on a HUD.
Okay.
That seems to be where they're trying to go for. They're trying to use similar technology. It could just be similar technology and design. But with CIG's emphasis on flexibility and what is it called? Like scalability, that seems to make sense. Where being able to customize your HUD, or for CIG developers to be able to customize HUDs just based off of what ship's flying, using MFD elements makes sense. So.
And this would explain why we didn't see the Aegis or Drake HUDs from a while ago coming into the game.
Those ones that had been in development and then like, oh, it's coming out soon, and then we never heard anything about them for years. That's the reason. Which may mean we're gonna probably see another new HUD before the end of the year, but we'll see.
You think we might do HUD and MFDs this year?
Oh, I think they're shooting for it. I don't know it's coming out this year. I have doubts it'll come out at the end of this year, but we'll definitely get an update for it at CitizenCon. I think this year CitizenCon will have an update on it.
I just need more. I really hope for good AR overlays. I hope for good indicators, and just like one of the things that I'm most hopeful for when it comes to like the overlay and the HUD is just telling us you are in this jurisdiction. This is the faction that owns this place. This is how they feel about you, positive, neutral, negative, that kind of stuff. Being in like the corner, just keeping you informed is stuff I hope to see with the new HUD and all that.
Yeah. I'd love to see, I really would love to see a modular ability for players to change it and change what's on the HUD, because some people just want clear. So I don't want anything on my desktop. I just want to be able to see where I'm going.
Yeah.
Whereas other people want to play, like, I want to have my reputation. I want to see a mission timer. I want to see like how much fuel I have left. I want to know what's my ammo count, all that stuff. So
all the things. Yep. I hope for that too. All right, Paul. That's about it for today.
Thank you for having me on. So.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. You feeling good about gameplay this year?
I feel like this is the year for missions. I feel like this is the year for the loop. This is the year of the gameplay loop, which is, I think if we get even half of the stuff that they've been mentioning, people would, as you and I both say, Pyro isn't the future. The future is the game itself. Pyro is just more space to express those gameplay loops, and there's no point in having Pyro without these loops. So the fact that they're sitting down and going, let's make these loops happen, let's make it work, is huge. And I'm hoping I've got a hit of the hopium, gotta inject it into my veins to get it to get through. But I think that's probably the big takeaway for this year. If you're a big fan of the PU, is we're going to see missions start to come to the forefront.
Yeah. Every Star Citizen fan should be happy about what they're saying about missions right now, because those missions are going to make the game more entertaining and more reliable for players to jump in and just play than it's ever been by far. And with the FPS scanning and the interaction system improvements, as well as their focus on the new player experience that they're doing in each city, like by the end of this year, this game could be the kind of game you can finally suggest to a friend, depending on how stable it is. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, you also got to remember Vulcan's coming out this year.
Right.
I can almost guarantee that Vulcan's coming out this year. So we'll definitely see performance increases. We'll hopefully see some stability improvements and more gameplay. If this happens, I'll Pyro what? Pyro who?
Yeah. I keep saying it, and I think every episode so far this year, but this could be a very good year for Star Citizen. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It could not be as well.
Could not be.
It's very important to stay that we're so early on in the year that we really have no idea where CIG is going. And because CIG doesn't tell us like they used to about what they're planning on doing, it's really hard to judge what CIG is looking forward to, even the next patch.
We won't have
they've really done that. So
we won't have a super good idea of the year, and for another 2 days after this episode comes out, February 8th, we should have some big updates. So if you're watching or listening to this, make sure to come back by the channel. Maybe some of you are listening to this and that info is already out, but come back to the channel the next week, and we'll probably be doing some reviews on that. And if you want to catch it from the AstroPub, because this man, he's got a voice, he's got a pub, and he's got the lore. If you want the lore, he's got the lore. Where can they find the lore? Tell them.
You can find the lore at the Astro Historian. So it's youtube.com/theastrohistorian. If you want to see my own takes on the various things that come out, you can check me out live at twitch.tv/theastropub or youtube.com/theastropub live. So
thank you again for joining me for today, man.
Make sure you're liking and subscribing to the video. Make sure you comment.
Smash it.
I want to hear your thoughts as well. I do. I'll read your comments. I want to hear your thoughts on any of these things. Do you think that myself or Space Tomato are like, are we hopiumatics at this point?
Of course.
Are we spreading the false words? Or do you agree with our sentiments? Make sure you check that out. Make sure you're commenting and read those monthly reports. Make sure you watch Space Tomato's video on the monthly report, which will and his summaries, which will probably be out in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, probably next Friday. Yeah.
So check that out.
It's January. Sorry, I am so confused now. Yeah, that would be this Friday. It'd be coming out
this Friday.
Gosh, I got lost. But yeah. All of that and more, and I'll see everybody in the next episode next week. Have a good one.